Hi, welcome back. We're in Lecture 12, Segment 2, and the emphasis in this segment is writing a script in R to do moderation analyses. So the emphasis this week, again, has been mediation and moderation analyses. We've been through the conceptual piece, we've been through the math, we've done mediation in R. Now the last part is just to do moderation in R. So that's the emphasis of this segment. The goal for this segment and for this script is to just write a script that will run the moderation analysis. And again, we'll use this same data set, the same example, where we're predicting happiness from extroversion, and now we'll add in socioeconomic status as a moderator variable. So with respect to R and the functions we'll use, again, it's just the LM function. And here we just have to run two regressions and see if we can account for more variance after adding the moderator and the product of the moderator variable and the main predictor versus not having that product term. So we're just going to run two regression analyses. And again, here's the example. For this moderation analysis, I'm going to leave out the mediator. That was diversity of life experience. We're just going to leave that out of the analysis. We're just going to focus on now that direct effect of extroversion on happiness, but adding in this potential moderator, socioeconomic status. Again, go back to the last lecture, Lecture 11, where we talked about, well, maybe we see this positive relationship between extroversion and happiness, but maybe that's only true for people with higher socioeconomic status. If we look at people with lower socioeconomic status, maybe that positive relationship isn't there. Or even more strongly, maybe the effect is negative. So maybe greater extroversion predicts lower life satisfaction or happiness. And that's what we'll test with this moderation analysis. Okay, so the data are available, again, on the website. It's stats1.example6. And again, we're just focusing on the moderator variable, SES here, not the mediator. So again, you should be able to download the data file and follow along with this segment and write a script that will run this analysis. As we've done, you see repeatedly now, start a script with your comments. So statistics 1, lecture 12, here's the moderation analysis, listing out the variable names. We'll read the data into an object, in this case a data frame, and for the mediation analysis, I called it med, so here we'll just call it mod. Here are the really essential pieces of code for this script. I left out all the tests of assumptions because we did a lot of that in the last script. So, but I should pause here and say we should have that before we get to these regression, these lines of code that do the regression analyses. So again, the assumptions are that we have univariate normal distributions, and here by each level of socioeconomic status. So remember from lecture 11, for simplicity, I just coded SES as low or high. So we want to look at those descriptive statistics by that categorical variable. So using the describe by function in R, you could get the descriptive statistics. If you subset the data appropriately in R, as we did way back at the beginning of the course, you could plot histograms, you could plot scatter plots, again, to look and see if you have univariate normal distributions in each level of socioeconomic status, to see if you have linear relationships within each level of SES, and to test homoskedasticity. I didn't bother going through all of that again because we've done it several times now, but to be clear, in any moderation analysis, before you get to these lines of code, you should have all those tests of assumptions and plot graphics and just see what's in your data. Just a general comment on how you should always do these analyses. So back to the point of this segment, here's the guts of it. We're just going to compare one model that I call the no mod model, so the no moderation model, to the mod model. This is a 60s mod model. And all we'll do is just compare those two and see if adding the moderation increases the model fit, increases the percentage of variance explained. And to do that explicitly, we'll use this ANOVA function to compare the two models. And we'll do this a lot going forward, and especially in the last week of the course, we'll talk about the importance of comparing models and seeing if one model accounts for a significantly greater amount of variance than another model. That's what this ANOVA command will allow us to do. And it sort of previews where we're going next week, which is analysis of variance. Okay, so here's our output for the NOMOD model, so no moderation. All I'm doing is putting in the two main predictors, extroversion and SES. And a way to talk about this, and I'll talk about this as we do analysis of variance next week, is you can think of these as the main effects. So, or some people call them the first order effects, as opposed to the moderation or second order or interactive effect. So these are just the main effects. And remember, I sort of played with the data in lecture 11 to make it so that now, if we just look at the main effects, taking into account SES, none of them are significant. So everything's about 0 here, if you look at the significant digits. And then if you look at the p-values, nothing's significant. So now we don't see this the positive relationship that we saw before between extroversion and happiness, because I added in SES and I added in a lot of low SES subjects, where you're about to see in a moment, and you saw in lecture 11, the low SES subjects have a negative relationship between extroversion and happiness. Here's the moderation analysis, the MOD model, and what you see most importantly is MOD, that's the product of extroversion and socioeconomic status. That predictor is significant, and you also see that the main effect of SES is now significant, but most importantly is that last p-value 0.00126. That tells us that the moderation effect is significant. And remember, back to lecture 11, the reason for that is we had a positive relationship between extroversion and happiness in the high SES group, and a negative relationship between extroversion and happiness in the low SES group. And if you want to subset these data in R, you can do that, and you can look at the relationship in scatter plots. I'm not doing that here in this segment because we've done that before, but you can do that and replicate what I showed you in lecture 11 with respect to this example. The last piece that's really important going forward for doing analysis of variance is this compare models piece. So all I did was call this ANOVA function in R, and I compared the two models, NOMOD model and the MOD model. And what it does is it calculates an F ratio, which I'll have a lot more to say about next week, but it calculates an F ratio, which is basically just systematic variance relative to unsystematic variance. And what it's telling us is the MOD model is accounting for more variance in the outcome measure than the NOMOD model. And it gives us a corresponding F ratio and a corresponding p-value. Again, we'll talk about how F ratios map onto p-values more next week when we cover analysis of variance. But if you notice, it's the same exact p-value as you saw from that one added predictor. Because all I did was add one predictor, the product of extroversion and SES. So the p-value associated with that t-test is 0.00126. And the p-value associated with this F ratio is the same exact thing, because we're testing the same exact contrast, or the same comparison. You'll also notice that the F ratio here, 10.564, is equal to that t-value, 3.25 squared. So t is a ratio of deviations, and f is a ratio of variances. So f will just equal t squared. And we'll see that next week when we do analysis of variance. So this is a nice way to end the multiple regression section because it allows us to compare models. It's a formal test of moderation. So this tells us that, yes, the moderation effect is significant. It replicates what we saw in the regression output. And it provides us with a nice segue to analysis of variance, which will be the topic, the main topic next week. Okay, so here's the changes to the script. It's not the entire script. Again, you would want to test all the assumptions. I didn't add that in here, but here are the changes you would want to make to this script. So just at the beginning, make sure you read in the correct data file, call it something new like mod, and then here's the important part for doing the moderation and the compare models. Again, it's real simple, just doing regression analyses, so using the LM and summary functions, and then this new piece just using the ANOVA function to compare the models. And that's it. And that's a wrap on multiple regression. Next week, we'll start in on analysis of variance.